And welcome back to the Spicy Sports Show with Sam Cerrone and Tom Crane, coming to you live from Denver, Colorado. And, of course, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Thank you. I don't want to be on the West Coast just yet.
Not yet. But we do have a lot to talk about. Again, the NFL draft was this weekend. The quote-unquote highs and the lows of the draft. Pretty good. Yes, pun intended, of course. How far can the Warriors get without Steph Curry? I think that's a topic of it's at least interesting at the very least. They're doing okay right now, obviously, without him right now. But as they go in deeper into playoffs, particularly the conference finals, and assuming they're going to play the Spurs, is he going to be available? And if not, how likely is it that the Warriors can get past the Spurs? Now, of course, the Champions League final is already set in Milan, May 28th. I'll tell you about the teams that made it. Pep Guardiola, his tenure at Bayern Munich ended a failure coming from Barcelona. Ended in the semifinal loss to Atletico Madrid on Tuesday. And I have two final topics. My first one will be the 3 people you probably shouldn't swipe right on Tinder, or shouldn't even be on Tinder to begin with. Number 1. And then number 2, the sports story of the year is already set. So ESPYs, you probably need to already make the trophy, and I already know who to give it to. It's amazing to me this story hasn't gotten as much pub as I thought it would, considering how much. I'll give it a hint. How much people love the underdog role. But again, thank you so much for listening. It's a good podcast. It's the 49th one. The next one will be the 50th podcast of this, at least since I restarted this back last year, or back in 2015, yeah. So 49 shows, one more to go to make it 50. So we're almost at 700 hits, which is also a good thing. Not bad, I guess. But without further ado, let's get started with the main topic of course, which is the NFL draft. And it had a lot of surprises, more so, especially in the first round, than I thought. I knew I think I knew QBs were going to be drafted more than 2, more than Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Those were going to go 1-2. That's obvious. But then after that, not only did we get another QB, of course, in Paxton Lynch. On top of that, there was the issue, of course, with Laramie Tunsil. For those of you who have been living under a rock the last week, about 5 or so minutes before the draft started, a photo of Tunsil leaked on the internet, which contained of him in a gas mask and a modified marijuana, whatever, that essentially like a bong at that point. You could just do whatever. And of course, being in Colorado, hey, I'm sure people are pro that. But it's interesting because when he mentioned that he was hacked, and he also owned up to it, which I like. I think at least owning it up right away shows some character. Again, as questionable character as this, he's okay to make up for it now that he's in the big time. But everyone who's ever said that's been hacked, I've never believed them, just because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, come on, like you're just making up excuses. Your team, quote unquote team, found a way to leak it, but either his team, someone close to him leaked it, and of course, he's dumbfounded as to why, or number 2, he has to be the dumbest person on the face of the earth to do that before the draft. And I'm going to go with the first option. I'm going to say that someone very close to him, and again, stories have come out of who it could be, some potential suspects of who could have been the person to leak it. And he lost about $9 million in the process. $9 million. That's more than Tom and I will make in our lifetime combined, probably.
Powerball, maybe.
Yeah, there's always a Powerball. It's true. But $9 million lost. Again, he was the overall, assuming that the Browns are they weren't, the number 1 pick wasn't going to get traded. He could have got number 1, and if it had stayed at number 1, he probably lost a total of $26 million. But because of the trades, he probably lost closer to $9 million, dropping from number 3, who was projected to go to San Diego, who took Joey Bosa, and then instead going to 13. with the Miami Dolphins. And they got him at a pretty good price. And again, he's one of the best tackles, top 2 tackles in the draft behind Ronnie Stanley of Notre Dame. And then what was the craziest part after the fact was the interview that he had, as answering all these questions about taking money at A&M or at Ole Miss, which again now puts a spotlight on Ole Miss for the NCAA to kind of look at, kind of throwing his coaches and teammates under the bus in that sense. But man, that's draft night is a night that you think is going to be something that you remember for the rest of your life. And I think for Laremy Tunsil, it's one he's probably going to forget. No question about it. I think what you will see happen is based off of this behavior, I think he already has a reputation already going in, not even playing a snap professional football, which is not a good thing. But again, it's a tackle. It's not like I guess that's the only nice thing about it. It's someone on the offensive line. It's not like a quarterback, a wide receiver, a playmaker that you would say, I'm not saying tackles don't make a big difference. That's why they're drafted really high. But he's a player that I would say in the long haul, I'd say 5 years from now, assuming that nothing else happens, more people will probably forget about it than will remember it, honestly. Tom, overall, what was your thought of the draft? I mean, you saw 3 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. Ezekiel Elliott going number 4 to the Cowboys was pretty amazing. And then the odd trade for the 49ers kind of going back in the first round and drafting a guard that they probably could have gotten in the second round, honestly. That was an interesting move from what I saw anyway. What are your thoughts on what happened overall, at least in the first round of the draft?
Well, at least in the first round, there were some interesting picks that I saw. Ezekiel Elliott, yes, that's still one of my top few that I'm wondering what Dallas was thinking. But now that I have seen it and have been reading about it, he's probably like the perfect acquisition because with the running back situation that's been in the Cowboys, it's hard to stay healthy. And I see what they're trying to go back to is a double threat sort of offense where you had Tony Romo throwing while DeMarco Murray in the past was their huge running back who got tons of carries. Once they traded DeMarco Murray to the Eagles, the running game slowed down and wasn't as effective as it was the previous year. So what I'm saying is that Ezekiel Elliott is probably going to is going to see a lot of snaps this year. Another one, Laremy Tunsil, as you were talking about, dropped, understandably, but I think this was a steal for the Miami Dolphins. Surprisingly, there's a guy who makes a poor choice. You don't know if he's going to make even more poor choices once they're on your team, but I think the Dolphins picked up a great offensive tackle, and they may actually be the 5,000 to 1 pick in the NFL if there ever was one, because I see the Miami Dolphins, their 7-round picks were pretty decent. They picked up good offense and defensive picks. When it comes down to the winners of the draft, I saw a couple. Houston Texans, they had Brock Osweiler. They got in the offseason as their new quarterback, and they supplied him with a lot of offensive tools. Will Fuller as their wide receiver in the first round, Braxton Miller from Ohio State in round 3, and a decent running back, Tyler Ervin, in round 4. Another great draft team was the Jacksonville Jaguars. They got Jalen Ramsey as their defensive back. They got mostly defensive players. Yannick Ngakoue, I know I just butchered his name, Sheldon Day, and Jonathan Woodard. So I see them building their defense up strong enough so that they can help support their newly somewhat efficient offense.
And don't forget about Miles Jack too, Tom. I mean, he's a player that could have gone in the first round, but injuries for him probably were the reason why he dropped in the second round, along with Jalen Smith going to the Cowboys. For the Cowboys, they got 2 picks that are very splashy moves. Again, in Ezekiel Elliott, when Dallas needed defense, they went with a player that was best player available more than likely, and is going to make an impact right away. There's no question about it. He's definitely going to be a favorite to win Rookie of the Year. He's definitely going to probably get the starting job in Dallas there. And of course, Jalen Smith from Notre Dame. One of the things about him is, you don't know if he's going to start this season on IR or not because of his knee issues. So it's interesting there. But I do agree Jacksonville definitely made a whole lot of defensive picks, which, again, is considering Gus Bradley's system, it makes sense. Getting younger and younger on defense, considering the talent that they already have on offense with Blake Bortles as their starting QB. For Buffalo Bills, my team, I'll say they did all right. I think one of the reasons why was because of the fall of Tunsil. It dropped a lot of players. It kind of scrambled a lot of GMs. Like I should probably pass on this guy. Probably not worth the time. So it kind of just made things a little bit more difficult. So we got Shaq Lawson, defensive end out of Clemson, to replace Mario Williams, who was gone because his cap was too high to take. And then in the second round, they picked a pretty good player in Reggie Ragland, a player that Tom, you and I talked about could probably be a first rounder, but slipped to the second round, which is a steal in my opinion. And again, just going down this draft here, the next QB taken off the board here, surprisingly, was Christian Hackenberg for me out of Penn State. He went to the Jets at 51. That's a pick that most organizations, if they pick a QB like that, hey, good, but it's the Jets, so I'm not sure how it's going to be. It can go one of two ways, I think. If Hackenberg can develop, I think he needs time to develop right now. People could fall in love with him based off of his freshman campaign, and he has the size about 6'4", 220, so he has the makeups of a prototypical quarterback. But the last two seasons have not been good for him, so definitely been on the decline. Another surprise move, Tom, and again, you can definitely comment on this if you want. Roberto Aguayo, the kicker from Florida State, one of the most accurate kickers in college football history, drafted in the second round. As a matter of fact, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traded up to get him. Tom, what do you think about that?
Well, if they're desperate to get a kicker, it's a little interesting for me. Usually, kickers don't go that early, not even until maybe the earliest, I would say, 4th or 5th round. This kid must have a leg, or must have shown that he is the best kicker available, the best kicker out there to get a round 2 pick. Football is a 3-prong game, and kicking on special teams is a huge one when it comes to extra points and to onside kicks and kickoffs. But drafting one in the second round, that's a little absurd to me. But hey, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need it, they need it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. And especially in this day's NFL where the extra point's been pushed back, and you didn't think it'd make that much of a difference, but it definitely made differences in games, of course, just decided by 1 point. The next QB drafted was pretty interesting because everyone thought it'd be Connor Cook, and everyone thought Connor Cook would actually be drafted in the first round. He fell all the way to the beginning of the 4th round to the Oakland Raiders. Before that, you had Cody Kessler from USC getting drafted to the Cleveland Browns, and you had Jacoby Brissett drafted in the 3rd round to the Patriots. So those were interesting moves. I definitely thought, I'm not sure what your thoughts on it, Tom, but why do you think Connor Cook fell so far to the 4th round?
A couple possibilities. Could have been his pro day. Was he throwing well with his draft stock when it came to? I'm trying to remember if he was in the combine or not. But most NFL teams do look at how well you do that 5-step